Welcome. Today I am here with Jeff and Jessica Depatie. Jeff has previously been on the show, so welcome back, Jeff. And this is Jess's first time on the show with me, so welcome, Jess.
Hello, Brian.
Hey,
Dr.
Brian.
Pank.
Great to have you guys here and great to catch up with you. I know, so since the shutdown happened, you guys have holed up out in Manitoulin Island, which for those of you who don't know is like out way out south of Sudbury, Ontario. So not quite the populated end of Ontario, but how are you finding the shutdown?
Oh my gosh, where to start?
Yeah.
So we came from Phoenix maybe a month ago, and the drive up was lovely. We don't tend to do much sightseeing on our drive across country every time we do this, moving from the US to Canada, since we split our time between both places. But the border was interesting. I have to say, it kind of shook us up for the beginning of this quarantine session. It was very much like our foundation was shaken with the thought that I might not be able to get across the border and that he might not be able to stay in the US, just given that recent order of non-permanent residents not being able to cross the border, basically. Because I am a spouse, they let me through, which they should have let me through anyway. But understandably, people at the border are really trying to do their job at the highest capacity possible and didn't want to make any mistakes. So we came across a bit of a trouble there. But yeah, I would say that, Jeff, you can jump in here at any moment, but I felt a little shaken up at the beginning, just with our given status. And
Yeah, so we drove, like Jess said, we drove up from Phoenix. We took a route that bypassed major centers, just going off the John Hopkins map, all the big red dots. So it was kind of like driving through ghost towns all the way up, meandering up to the border. And then at the border, we just got our first taste of what I think is just fear and working with inadequate information and trying to inject government policy and all the headaches that starts to bring up. For me, being with Jess is the most important aspect of my life. And they were doing everything they could to stop that in my mind, because I was Canadian, I had to be there. She's American. Americans were saying Americans had to stay in the US, but clearly written up in the policy when the government started the quarantine acts, workups, spouses were allowed to cross. Anyways, I started to feel like, okay, my human rights here are starting to be infringed upon, and I don't think someone's doing it on purpose. But doing it by accident is just as bad in my eyes. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say, it feels like a lot of the government reactions, they're trying to get things out as quickly as possible, and there's not always, they try and account for whatever they can, but they don't always do it quite as well, and then things obviously get lost further in communication. I know for some of the financial aid programs, there's been a lot of talk about how many different groups are getting sort of left in the dark in terms of finances and communication with businesses. There's no direct line, so you're just kind of stuck checking for news whenever you get a chance and sort of basing things off that. So I know it's a crazy time for everybody, and communication is certainly not as strong as it could be.
Yeah, what we tried to do, Brian, is when this all started unfolding, we started to see some of the quote unquote craziness happening. And we were like, okay, we're just, all our needs are being met. All our wants are being met. Nothing's really changed in our lives. We're not going to buy into the panic. And it seemed to work for us until, like I said, it started to impact us, where we, going about our normal business, and then it was infringing on us. I'm surprised the governments didn't have kind of rollout packages for, economic collapse and medical systems being overwhelmed. I'm a little surprised and shocked at them. I'm not wagging my finger or nothing like that. I just feel, shouldn't, disaster planning be part of it? I just feel like that's important.
yeah. So what we've done here is, since we had when we crossed the border, and the reason why I brought that up is because we took that as an opportunity to tune into some of the more fear mindsets intentionally, to see what other people are experiencing, because there is a lot of adversity that almost everyone is experiencing at the moment. It just comes in different flavors. And I would say we had a solid 2 weeks of really tuning into, especially here on the island where it's a very small community, what are some of the problems that are coming up for people? One of them is this us versus them mindset. Understandably, they're concerned about people outside of their community coming into their community, especially with the communication from the PM, the president, the media, the world media really saying that travelers are the reason why this is all happening. And on the surface, it doesn't seem like that big of an issue, but we just put that in the back of our pocket. What is having a you don't belong here mindset? What does that do for people? When is that appropriate to have? And when does that become a dangerous, slippery slope moving forward? And so, yeah, I would say for the last couple weeks, or for the first couple weeks, we were just jotting down all of the potential challenges that we see slowly snowballing or having the potential to slowly snowball. And I don't think we need to go through all the problems that we came across. I think Jeff and I will do some kind of maybe podcasts later to go through all of these things. And I think what we could talk about is maybe some of the ways that we have taken those problems and turned them into fun opportunities for us.
Yeah, I would just add, like everybody, Brian, we're dealing with a data shortage. We're dealing with misinformation, sensationalization and polarization, as always, from the news, just garbage coming out of there. So like most people, we're all working with this misinformation or a lack of information or no information, backed with, definitely a fear undertone instead of all the positivity that it could be delivered in. I know that sounds like, okay, how can this, I don't even want to call it a pandemic because I don't think it's a pandemic. I think it's just this like thing that's ballooned out of control. And we can, everyone knows all the stats about what kills more people and all that. So what we did is we took that time to kind of build up. We were like, well, we don't really know anything in this position of the COVID situation. We're not government officials. We're not the experts. We're not even, we're not scientists, whatever. So how do we build up that information? So we needed to kind of start asking the questions, look into the relevant sources, the municipalities, the OPP, the ones that appear to be stable government websites, and start building up our plan. Because we had this one, before we get into the things that we did move on to, Jess, one thing that we started to notice that was super interesting to us. Our value set pre-COVID-19, the things we value in life, and post-COVID, it didn't change. So for us, there was a lot of like, what's going on here? Why is everyone in this like, and we get it, money shortages and all that kind of stuff. Totally understand the survival mindset. It's, I don't know. So for us, it took a little while to kind of light the fire of, okay, we got to adapt here. And that led into, for us, a great opportunity where Jess and I have always talked about homesteading as a blanket term with, permaculture, goats, chickens, rabbits, a sustainable little farm where we get really good organic food, et cetera, et cetera. So we've started to implement that into our plan. We weren't worried about the survival portion. We wanted to add to the thriving portion of it.
Yeah, and to add on to what you just said there, and to clarify or maybe say it a different way, it's not that we don't believe in the seriousnness of the virus or the illness that's happening to so many people at the moment. It's more that Jeff and my responsibility as a context of our relationship and what we feel is part of our life's work here on this planet and for this lifetime is to help people with fear and future implications of what fear can do for you if you don't transform it in a positive way. So that's just why, the actual virus and talking about how serious that is in terms of deaths, that's not really our story to tell. And so that's why, yeah, Jeff and I we kind of like just blow past that because that's other people's responsibility. We don't have the information to be able to speak to that.
Plus it doesn't help to dwell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, and I think a lot of people are in that situation where the information people are getting is coming from all over the place and it's hard to tell what's good. And I think reasonably all people can do at this point is, stay at home, try not to interact too much with others, but is really control their own environment and their own fear. So that's kind of why I wanted you guys on the show today, was so we could talk about how you guys are handling it, what steps you're taking, in hopes that other people can emulate some of that.
Yeah, well, I think that's going to be a really fun conversation. One of the things that we had talked about in identifying some of these problems that we're seeing is, and the fear that's spreading is around people and their perception of their own safety when it comes to how much food they'll have in the future. If the border really does shut down, for Canadians, that could be detrimental. For any country, that could be detrimental, but just because we're up here, I can speak more specifically to that. Given that we just came out of winter, a lot of our supplies come from south of the border.
Yeah, most crops here are not growing at this point. So
right. And just preparedness in general. Do I feel like I have what it takes if the electricity went out, or if the financial system doesn't recover and money becomes obsolete? How do we survive, and who's our tribe and all of that? So Jeff and I put ourselves in those people's shoes and have been working backwards to find out, okay, where do we start to help people? And we're using our niece and nephew as kind of like guinea pigs for this because they're brand new people, they're 5 and 7, and they're being met with their first slice of kind of like a real issue here where they're feeling it just like adults are. And so we've decided that going through Maslow's hierarchy from the base up to self-actualization would be a really helpful and just like logical way to go about preparing somebody so that when your foundation is shaken, you have the information and you have the right mindset to be neutral in everything and still have the right attitude about what's actually happening.
You can piece out what is just perception or perspective and what is reality, right? Because the mind, sometimes our fear responses don't really know the difference all the time, where, like stress and anxiety, where it's just perceived threat versus real threat. So we started playing around with this with the kids. I just want to give a little bit of context there because Jess mentioned tribe. So right now there's Jess, myself, my sister, her 2 kids, and her ex-husband living together, trying to figure out this dynamic of, without being like too prepper mindset, but prepping for the future, which also just involves, like I mentioned, permaculture and some livestock, which if nothing happens from this, then it's just good, healthy living. The kids are loving all that stuff. But just mentioned tribe, and those balancings. Okay, how do we fit our normal daily routines and habits and patterns in with these other adults? Because most people in the Western world have moved away from living in a quote unquote more tribal way. It's usually what do they call it? The nuclear family, right? Mom, dad, kids, maybe one sibling every now and then, maybe a mom or a dad that comes and lives with them, but not, multiple individuals and children living together, one roof. So that's been interesting, adapting to that. I'm sure a lot of people out there are experiencing, oh boy, spending 24 hours with you every day is
it's a different situation than I was used to, for sure.
Yeah. So that's been part of the teasing apart. Okay, how do we do this? And we just happened to start not homeschooling, but I guess you call it homeschooling for the kids, where we would give them, a lot of people are probably doing this, wake up, some routine stuff, brush your teeth, all that jazz, then some educational stuff. But we wanted to start intentionally raising their consciousness and their awareness and, the consequences of their perspectives. So we took a nice simple one and started with Maslow's, which has been really great because as we're going through it with the kids and really teasing it apart and figuring it, like helping them figure out how to conceptualize some of these concepts, especially like the young one, Jade, she's 5, she's probably more self-actualized than a lot of people out there. But how
with you guys as mentors, I'm not surprised.
Oh, that's nice.
But watching, like Jess was saying, the community around us. So we're in a very small area that the fear spread quickly. And the thing with fear is it can feel right. Like on the scale of consciousness, being angry or against someone else can actually be higher up than where you were before in the lower areas of like apathy and boredom and shame and guilt. And this has actually made them feel more alive. And what happens there is they feel right and righteous in what they're doing. And man, oh man, it's led to some interesting spirals. I won't go too far into it.
Oh my gosh, Brian, I want to talk about so many things. Like, rabbit hole so hard. I do want to touch on that a little bit, because I think that was one of the more fascinating things that we came across, is that, so just as a story, Jeff, his sister, and the 2 kids were going for a walk. And because this island is really small, people know that we're not permanent residents here. This is our summer place to go. Anyway, they're trying to, oh no, this was the day that we got the emergency text message that said, only leave your house for medical appointments, for groceries, and I don't know, like taking your pet to the vet. And it had a link to the official notice. So my assumption is most people just read the headlines, which is just the text, and don't click through. And that text would tell you that it's not legal to go outside of your house for a walk or anything that's not, on that list of things. So there were people driving up and down. And the way it impacted the kids in particular is that we had some guy here taking pictures of them, turning us into the authorities, where we made sure we called the OPP, the local OPP, just to make sure we weren't doing anything wrong here. But the kids were afraid. They didn't really know what was going on. Well, at first they weren't. They just thought that somebody was taking pictures of us. And then they see Jeff's reaction, which is like, I need to go talk to this guy. And then their perception of fear heightened, where they're like, oh, something's wrong here. So as we go through Maslow's hierarchy with them, we're showing them, this is your perception. That guy was not a problem a second ago. And then when Jeff talked to them, you guys were scared and your perception of safety changed and you were afraid. But really the reality is it's a guy with a camera and we don't know anything. How can we stay neutral in the situation and use our minds and our intuition just to be safe, but be realistic about what's actually happening right now?
Yeah, especially on his psychological needs, where the basic needs segue into psychological needs. Your mind can control a lot of those, and that perception. And the little kids, trying to piece it all together as a 5 and 7 year old can be difficult. But it's been interesting. It's been great because, just for those who aren't familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, it starts off with physiological needs, safety needs, belongingness, love and love needs, esteem needs, and self-actualization, and then onto self-transcendence. Well, in the physiological needs, there's a lifetime of learning there for the little kids, sleep, food, air, water, all those kinds of things. And what we're doing into our daily routines and habits is figuring it out. Okay, so we have, 4, 5, 6, 6 individuals and a haywire dog that all need their food needs met, their sleep needs met, and they're all different, right? So we're working together to show each other's perspectives and what works best. And it's been fun. There's been no need. Everyone's pretty patient with it. Everyone understands we got to work together. But it's led to some really good conversations about individual needs and wants, not versus others, just understanding that there are other people with different perspectives and different needs, even when it comes to food, when it comes to how they breathe and stuff. And then those have led to some fun conversations. I'm a big believer in, I don't have like rigid routines, but I like to do, breath movement, posture and relaxation most mornings, whether that's some form of yoga or qigong, or I like using the nunchucks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, we rabbit hole with the kids. Okay, what is breath? How do you do breath? Is there different styles? Yeah, box breathing, Wim Hof, et cetera, and then movements. And then it's also led to some fun things where we bring that over to the cycles for the chickens and the mealworms and all those things that we are putting into those life cycles. Those, what do they call it? Like food chains?
The cycle of life.
The cycle of lives. And it's been pretty fun and expansive, especially for the kiddos, but even us, we're constantly learning.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about boundaries. That's something that has come up for us because we're 2 families joining as one. And then part of their family is a recently separated couple. And so they're dealing with a context that's very different when you are staying in the same house together. And we found that communication is our number one tool for living a productive and joyful life in this house. It doesn't mean we always have to be happy, but we all have confidence that the language that we're using is impeccable, more or less. And if it's not, we're working towards, how can I have said that better? How can I seek to understand before feeling understood? And I was just on a call with my good friend Ashley Bledsoe, who put together a program called the Communication Code. And one of the things that I learned from her, because I myself have always had a challenge expressing my boundaries or even identifying what they are. I love a lot of alone time. I love quiet, but I'm also an extrovert. So when I want to be out there, I want to be out there. And now living in a kind of is the camp that we're in is like, we don't really have rooms. It's kind of like an open area. Brian, you've been here. And so we're staying up in the lofts. And so we don't really even have walls. And so for a moment there, I was starting to freak out a little bit, like, oh my gosh, I don't have any space, or my perception of space. And what my friend Ashley had helped me through was identify what your values are. And boundaries are essentially how your values are, how you feel your
values are being encroached on.
Yeah, values are being encroached on. And other people don't know my values. And so the best way for me to share that with people is to express what values I hold dearest to myself. Like natural cycles is one of them that's important for me. So I tune into cyclical rhythms of nature and whatnot. And then how can you guys understand that about me? And it's not, at that point, it's not even a compromise. They're super willing to help me be my best self. And because of that willingness, I'm also super willing to reorganize the way that I think I need to be. So the last week, I've done a lot of work on myself to reframe this new life that we have for the time being. Could be forever, who knows? That's all another weird thing to think about, is like the end, is it near? Are we ever going to go back to life as usual?
Well, that's been a really interesting conversation in itself, because I saw some projections that we were looking at like 18 months, maybe 2 years. The Tokyo Olympics came out this morning or the other day and said that they're not even confident that the 2021 Olympics are going to be a go now. And so, nobody has any idea how long this is going to be.
Yeah, the question starts to become, though, Brian, I think, when does this infringe on our human rights? Like, now I don't even have the right to go die, be sick. If I want to congregate with a bunch of people and, roll the bones, the danger of it. I mean, we do that every day driving. Well, maybe not so much right now, but driving in cars and eating white sugar, we're constantly doing this. Why is this all of a sudden, okay, lockdown, frog in a boiling pot, Again, I'm not trying to sway. It's just part of the conversation. I feel like, okay, when do we start reassessing what's important here?
No, and I have seen some civil liberty groups have come out and really encouraged people to make sure that, if things are implemented where your freedoms are encroached on, when your liberties are encroached on, to ensure that there's a definite end date to when that policy ends, and that it's not going to be something that's just implemented kind of across the board with no further oversight, because it could be, I'm hoping it's not, but it very well could be an opportunity to try and encroach on some liberties.
Yeah, it's and some people's reaction to what Jeff just said might be that it's irresponsible to think that way, or it's too soon or something like that. What we're saying is it's always a great time to have critical conversations and to ask questions. I think that is one of our most important roles at this time, where we are kind of limited as to what we can do outside of our homes, but just be curious about what's happening. It doesn't mean that you become a rebel and go outside and spread your germs all over the place. But one of the bigger things that's concerning to me is that people are feeling defensive when somebody asks them a question about something that they perceive to be true. I think you should feel just kind of excited that people want to know your point of view, or that you might have the potential to shift a point of view, or excited that you might have your own perception of everything change. Just ask the questions. And because it's when people stop asking questions that things can become dangerous, because the people making laws are just people, and if they don't have doubt, just a natural self-doubt, even doubt coming from outside sources, then decisions can be made that might not be as future proof as they might hope. You know, we all need to be crafting our futures together. And yeah, I think that's one way we can be really productive in this stay-at-home period of our lives.
Yeah, it doesn't mean everything's conspiracy theory. Just like Jess said, it's all human nature. As much as people would like to think they're infallible and above reproach, we're all human beings where most of our thoughts are guided by emotion and, you know, human needs. So just to look at it. It's not about, like I said, building an enemy, a conspiracy theory. It's about, we're at a really unique time where we can all contribute to the future of mankind. We were reading a poem yesterday, actually, that's starting to spread around from the Spanish flu, I believe it was. And it's so interesting because we'll put a link, I think, Brian, maybe if you want, in your show notes.
Yeah, if you can send that over to me later, then I would absolutely love to put it in the show notes.
I will do. And it just talks about how people are, okay, what am I doing to cope? And it's, you know, physical activity, meditation, all the things we're doing as well. And then it's like, okay, you know, build up your relationships, et cetera, et cetera. And then, okay, realize now that we have a chance to move forward. You know, this is an opportunity and time for us to all expand our consciousness, work better as a collective, you know, be a little, step out of our perceived survival mindsets and grow together.
Absolutely. And I think that in general is really important for people to do. And I think it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day of your life and ignore that. And I think you're right. It's absolutely an opportunity right now to be able to take the time to delve into that.
Yes. Yeah. I would also say that in this shove to, we have a potential here. So I think you've probably noticed this, but you're seeing people who are rising to the occasion, who you're like expecting, oh yeah, that person is just crushing with the way they're communicating their challenges and how to progress, how to be productive with this. And then you're seeing people who have fallen a little bit into panic, whether that's on the conspiracy theory side or into the side of don't ask questions, just do what you're told. And I think the people in the middle don't really have a place to talk about it. Being in the middle is weird because you don't have a group to identify with. But I think we all need to realize that most people are in the middle right now. Most people are inherently smart and good. And one of the things that I would suggest doing, because we've done it and it's helped us quite a bit throughout this, is being alone isn't really healthy, you know, when you're not having conversations with people that you love and respect and like. So now is a really great time to collect your tribe, to integrate yourself into a tribe. And, you know, just hopping on a call with you a couple weeks ago when I was going through just sort of like when we were essentially being stalked and harassed in our camp for coming from the US and people wanting to kick us out. I was like, not in a good place. Talking to you was amazing because you're coming from a different perspective of not having to deal with that and just kind of, you know, being a good friend and bringing me back to a neutral position to be able to look at it logically. Talking to my dad, for example, is great. Like, he has a background, he's a meteorologist. And yesterday he was just talking about how the projections are only as good as the data that you put into them. And because I'm not a data analyst type of person, that's never been a place that I've really understood these models and things like that. So it's nice to have a group of people that you can reach out to that specialize in different things, that can speak to different things that you need to fill in the blanks with. So yeah, I would say that that's been one of our just gifts, is that we've had the SFE tribe. The trials is about to open up again for its second cohort, and the conversations in there are just so next level. It's blowing my mind, and it gives me so much excitement and hope for people who are, yes, they're confused about what's going on, but they're being super productive about it. And that doesn't mean just staying at home. Well, they are staying at home, but not just staying at home and keeping themselves at their highest capacity. They're like really trying to figure out, how can I communicate productive messaging to the people who aren't doing super well at the moment? And I think that's really noble.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm going to get you, if you don't mind, to talk a little bit about the trials, because I know it's been a tool that you guys, as well as a couple other awesome people in the self-development world have put together to help people push towards self-actualization.
Sure. Do you want me to talk about it, or do you want to?
Well, go ahead, sweetie.
Okay. All right. So as some of your listeners might know, a year ago, we ran our first serial of the process, which is a multi-phased event that uses the method of post-traumatic growth to take massive leaps in self-actualization and growth and all of that. We interviewed hundreds of men and chose 30 who showed up in Northern Ontario and went through an epic adventure that you were there for. And this year we had to change the dates to October, and hopefully it can still happen, but we have our second serial coming up. Now, because the availability for that program is so limited, only 30 men a year, there was a request from everybody else that either wasn't accepted or couldn't make it happen. They wanted something that was a little bit more accessible from home. And so that's where the Trials was birthed. The Trials is mimicked after the 3 mythic trials that will happen commonly in many cultures. The first trial being something that is very physical, that tests the limits of your body. The second trial is very mental and emotional, something that really tests the resiliency of your mental body. And then the third trial is taking what you've learned through the first and second trials and lessons and the foes and the friends that you meet along the way, and starting that hero's journey and answering your specific call. So within these 3 trials, we have Rick Alexander, who's our chief growth operator, who focuses on the mindset and helping people find what they really want, what are their superpowers, where are their shadows, and gives these amazing lessons along the way that you go through. And then on the physiology side, we have our cadre, Aaron Guyette, who's our chief of physical strategy. He helps you basically at the end of the 12 weeks of this online program be able to program for your body specifically, so you understand the science behind your body, which I think is a huge gap in most people's understanding. Like when they take on a program, they don't understand why they're doing certain things, and there are certain movements that are just a little bit boring and don't look like they make a lot of sense. You may be called to doing more, let's say, power output than endurance or strength, and that leaves you a less robust human because you're less well-rounded. So at the end of this program, essentially, you have the tools to become your own life coach through Rick's portion, and your own physical strategist through Aaron's portion. And then Jeff, who's sitting here, he teaches the art of contemplation, which is probably the most powerful tool that you can take out of the course, which is understanding what are the important questions to ponder in your life, and then what's the process of taking that and creating output with it.
Yeah, so it bridges the gap between the mind and the body. So you can, as you get better at the art of contemplation, you move through your thoughts, then down your emotions, and then to your kind of brain stem human needs area. And you can actually feel these things out and get in tune with all your just mentioned cycles, solar cycles, all that kind of stuff, your day-night cycles, your sleep patterns, what water do you prefer, what, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The idea is that you learn to tune yourself all the time, because that's how, in order to move up, and we're using Maslow's hierarchy, there's many different ones, individuation by Jung, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The path, the pilgrimage in Christianity, there's all kinds of algorithms to raise your consciousness out there. But in order to do that, you need to tune into yourself more and more and more, not in a selfish way. Just in order to be your best self outwardly, you need to tune your vessel, your mind and your body. You need to, as just mentioned, build up a robustness for when adversity comes. It's always an opportunity. Mm-hmm. It's always an opportunity. And the more you do that, the more you cycle through trials or post-traumatic growth cycles or the hero's journey, the better you become. I hand on my heart believe this, at living life. You show up better for others. Your mind opens up and expands and is ready to absorb more information. we could talk about the reticulated activating system and your attentions and all that kind of stuff. It just, contemplation allows you to do this. It helps you free your mind up. We also teach meditation in the trials and all kinds of different breath work, reprogramming your breath. So we come into this world and our breath patterns are kind of just haphazard at best, right? We never really tune it up for when you're relaxing, or tune it up for when you need high output, et cetera, et cetera. And the same thing with your mind. We use two channels, well, a few channels, but the physiological, the psychological, and the spiritual, which bridges that gap, I believe, nicely. And then, and then people just learn how to cycle through it more and more. And there's all kinds of other benefits in there. There's emotional expression with, stream of consciousness journaling. There's our Slack group where you get to talk and use expansive language with each other, moving towards goals. So there's accountability built in as well, et cetera, things like that.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say, I know this is this is definitely something for somebody who is looking for, and if we're using the Maslow's hierarchy, help more in that self-actualizing piece. Probably not for everybody on the planet right now. I don't think everybody's ready for that, unless you want to kind of counter me on that. But what I was going to say too is I know that there is one in the works, more for people who feel like they're uncertain about things in general in their life at this point too, and trying to help just sort of give that stable grounding almost.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. The trials is, I would say, most effective for people when they have gone through some kind of transition, because when you go through a big transition in your life, everything's shaken up, and if you're in the mindset of like, okay, I see that I'm being handed a gift here with this shakeup, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a job change, whether it's leaving the military, anything, a parent dies, everything that you thought to be true has the potential to be different now. And that is when the trials can really be amazing. It can also be amazing for people who have done a lot of work on themselves already, but are tired of looking towards other gurus and experts to help them make the next choice in their life. That's why we were so inspired to make the trials, is because that's just kind of irritating to us. We have so many experts in our tribe here. Yourself, Aaron, Jeff, Rick, Jennifer McMaster, Dr. Ben, oh my gosh, we have maybe 30 people that are just top-notch experts, but they're constantly humble with the amount of information that they have, and they just have the type of personality that's always seeking advice, but are also confident in their own ability to know that to listen to their highest self. And so that, I would say, is the main purpose of the trials, is to give other people that confidence to trust in themselves
without telling them what all the answers are. Because how you live life is always going to be different than how I live life, and that's how it should be. That makes for an interesting life, having individuals all around. But it doesn't mean there are forks in the road that we can implement to help them make those decisions. You could walk one day and then walk the other day. And to leave it fluid, and then onto the other program. Yeah.
So you, Brian, you're working with us and the rest of our tribe here to put together I don't even know what we're calling it yet. I was thinking Robust Human Summit or something like that.
I like that. Yeah, I've been brainstorming some titles, but that might do it a little better than everything I've come up with so far.
Let's chat after this. We'll
absolutely
collab. Where we're going to be going through Maslow's hierarchy up until the self-actualization portion, where we're going to talk about how to optimize your breath, how to optimize your water intake and your knowledge about water. And we're going to break it up into a survival and a thriving version of each of these different modules. So as an example, water. At this moment, we want to help people get out of the physiological need worry. So where are you right now? Let's consider the worst case scenario just so we have an emergency plan, right? what happens if the water shuts down in your apartment complex for a month or for like an unknown period of time? Because that's usually the case. It's an unknown thing that happens. Do you have enough water in your home to get you to the next phase of whatever needs to happen? Do you? Probably not. Like, we can't store that much water. So where is the closest body of fresh water near you? Where is your closest spring? Just really quick, Google things just so you have in the back of your mind in the case of a worst case scenario. Now that we got that out of the way, how can you thrive with your water? Did you know that water holds memory and the quality of water that you drink really matters? Blah, 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 all these things. So we're going to have an expert on water talk about that module so you can move like skyrocket through this hierarchy of needs. And then get to that self-actualization portion as a more robust human.
Which I love, and I think there's a huge need for right now, because I think there are a lot of people in that fear element, because I mean, none of us really know what's going on, and save, you know, some of us have been really fortunate in our lives that we've gone through experiences that have helped us with uncertainty training. I know something that hasn't necessarily been touched on, but Jeff, being an ex-Special Forces operative, is definitely going to have a very different concept of venturing into the unknown and his survival skills than, say, the average person.
Yeah, that's the whole point of something like the trials, the process, the program that we're going to put together with you, Brian, is life is an unknown, really. And if it's not, then you're in a comfort zone, and that's boring. So we're here to put programs out there that you cycle through these unknowns, and then you eventually build up principles and guidelines and guiding principles for you to cruise through life, I think, more holistically, with more adventure, with less fear. Because you mentioned the unknown. That's the epitome of fear. People are so scared of the unknown, but if you understand your body and its needs and how to achieve those needs with a quote unquote survival mindset, not survival as in I'm surviving in panic, but survival, something's happened. Okay, well, I can deal with this. I have lots of options. My environment presents all kinds of options. And if you understand those options and how to get them in the best way, you can stay of more sound mind. And the more you cycle through things like this, the more you hang out in the higher echelons of something like Maslow's hierarchy, etc., with less fear drawing you down to the bottom.
Yeah, I would say one of our hypotheses right now is that the more cycles of post-traumatic growth that you go through, in other words, the more hardship that you endure and grow from
in a conscious way,
yeah, intentionally, the higher your consciousness raises and the less you need, if we're looking at the hierarchy of needs. So you need less food. Doesn't mean you have to eat less food. It's just, you can survive with less because you've tried it with less. You know that you can fast for 3 days at least and be super functioning and mentally aware. You need, your perception of safety is less because you've gone through actually dangerous situations. And so, yeah, as your consciousness raises.
Well, so like with safety, your fear regulatory systems, your cortisol dumps, and then your parasympathetic nervous systems, et cetera, all those systems get used to functioning like that. But then your upper cerebral areas also get used to it. And those are, your high conscious areas where your thoughts can help your body remain in control. That's how you can come up against fear situations of unknown, and stay calm and decisive. And it's only by, practicing that, using those functions, lighten up the amygdala and channeling your senses in a healthy way, can you build healthy behaviors. You're not going to, some people say that you sink to the level of your training, you never rise to the occasion. I agree to that to like 99%. Some people do rise beyond. It's usually a culmination of their life experience that appears that they're rising above the situation. And it's just that they have some tools that help offset that chaos. But you have to stress these things in a healthy way. The body is meant to be stressed in healthy ways and adapt and then improve and be better the next time. That's why we go to the gym. That's why we do so many things. Practicing metabolic flexibility. So not just eating the same meal all the time, you know, getting your body used to burning carbs versus fat, you know, being in ketosis versus not, being in a deep fast state. People are always surprised when they get like 5 days into a fast or something, and then they're like, I'm able to do a workout. It's like, yeah, you know, you got one of the most sophisticated creations in the universe as far as we know right now. There could be, you know, highly advanced aliens or whatever out there, but as far as we know, we are like super capable, super adaptable. It just, we also have this mind that can get a little bit lazy and complacent and likes to be comfortable, and that's okay. It's good to be comfortable too. I love my hot shower and a comfortable bed. Mm-hmm. It's just every now and then you got to push that comfort zone to continue that growth process.
Yeah, that reminds me of this biological classification that I had heard once, and I'm so going to butcher this, but and help me out here if you remember what I'm talking about. So humans, biologists, who studies animals?
Biologists, okay. But there's all different ones, right? You know, primatologists,
animal scientists say they categorize different animals and different bugs and different creatures as being either adaptive or generalists or specialists. Okay. So let's say that there's a woodpecker or some kind of bird that has a beak that's shaped to only get nectar from a certain type of flower. In the flower in abundance, the bird thrives, but let's say through human intervention, maybe this flower just disappears. Well, because this bird is a specialist, it also disappears. Versus like the cockroach. The cockroach is a generalist. It can survive in really anything you throw at it. They've said that humans are perhaps the only species at the moment that's both. So we come in two forms now. There are the people that are going to survive in anything that is thrown at us. And then there are some of us who have fallen so hard into our current status quo and patterns and have forgotten how to survive, forgotten how to make their own food, how to forage, how to find water. Yeah, we've forgotten how to be wild. Those people in worst case scenarios will be extinct, like the bird with the weird beak. So I thought that was fascinating. Like that was a big perspective shift. And I was like, I don't want to be the specialist. There are lots of things that I don't know right now that given this opportunity to, I don't know, be inside all the time. And this is my opportunity to bone up on some of these things. So in the case of a worst case scenario, I can categorize myself confidently as a generalist species.
Yeah, and done in a way where it's not just like prepper or survival mentality. Yeah. It's, okay, well, how can I make sure I know how to survive? How can I make sure I know how to thrive and build good relationships and cultivate healthy tribe? And, you know, if something terrible did happen, you know, help move into the next levels of humanity in a really great way where we don't have to mess everything up to learn. We can build up front in a healthy way, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, we're not worst case scenario people all the time, but this has just definitely brought up some things that we find interesting that we wanted to dive into anyway. So yeah.
You know, again, not being like full out preppers here, but we had Aaron on the podcast. I can't remember when that actually released, but you know, like he's more or less ready for the worst case scenario of everything, which makes nothing the worst case scenario in a weird way. So I feel like being prepared for that worst case scenario is a good thing.
Yeah, that's the military's experts at doing that. Mm-hmm. The military has been cycling men through these cycles for thousands of years. And, you know, full disclosure, we do use some of those processes in the Special Forces Experiences methods because they work so well. And like you said, if you come up against it, you come up against it. Well, when you're used to climbing over these walls, these hurdles, and turning them into opportunities, it doesn't mean everything's always rosy and that, you know, you turn a blind eye to the problems. They just get easier. Not easy as in easy, like the efforts, less force, and you get more power.
Yeah, and it's fun. You know, we're starting seeds. We have 25 chickens on their way here. We have 2 rabbits for breeding. right now. We've become mealworm farmers. I don't even want to tell you how many worms I have to touch every day.
Red wigglers.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that part's
and I know
gross.
that's a thing for you too. So
yeah, don't love that part.
As if the state of the world right now wasn't enough trauma for you. Now you're starting farming worms.
Yeah, I'm healing my relationship with insects. My post-traumatic growth cycle at the moment. But yeah, it's just freaking fun, you know? And I haven't met anyone that hasn't had some kind of interest in wanting to be a little bit more self-sufficient. So yeah, I would say that this is a brilliant opportunity for us to do the stuff that we've always wanted to do, but have kind of made excuses for not doing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Brian? How are you, like, what would you say, if we were to flip the tables here, is one way that you have cultivated your superpowers up until this point where you might have something that gives you an advantage during times of unknown?
Well, I think a lot of it has been spending times with the different tribes. So some time spent with you guys. And I know I took a lot of razzing for it, but when I had come up last year for the SFE, I didn't have a lot of like wilderness survival or camping experience. So spending time there has instilled some confidence in me that, you know, I at least probably have some basic survival skills right now. But then also the mental, I don't want to call them coping skills, but in this case, they are, I guess, a coping skill in what I've picked up from you, what I've picked up from working with Camp Aftermath, which is an Ottawa-based charity for helping vets and first responders with PTSD. And a lot of it is helping to teach these guys, you know, positive daily habits that are there for their incremental growth, things like meditation, movement, yoga, community, and having all these skills. And I apologize, there's some drilling going on outside. I've been trying to keep my mic kind of off for when I'm not speaking, but you're definitely hearing it now. But all these skills, and I know, Jeff, you're not necessarily as big on routine, but just habits, I guess, more than routine, that give some sense of normalcy, but also a lot of them exist to free up some of the mind space that could be otherwise dedicated to panic and fear right now. So for me, throughout this experience, I've tried to keep things as normal as I can in terms of habits. So, you know, first thing in the morning, I'm usually either out for a run or on a treadmill doing some cardio. There's a workout built into my day, sometimes a second one. There's some meditation, there's some journaling, there's time to, you know, check in with my girlfriend Megan in terms of how we're both handling things, because again, we're spending 24 hours a day together, how much we're getting on each other's nerves or not on a given point. And really just sort of making sure I'm taking the time, because I've got a lot of it, to hit on all these positive habits that I think I was pretty good at doing before this, but now I'm extra good because I just have unlimited amounts of time to do it with. And then also making sure I'm attaching myself to some sort of a purpose and some sort of a community. So for me, the podcast has been a really nice excuse to make sure I'm connecting with a lot of people, some of whom I connected with pretty regularly in terms of you guys, and some that I haven't connected with in a little while. So socially, I feel like I'm fulfilled there. And, you know, having those communities and those people, I think is really important regardless of what kind of a situation we're in. So you know, it's great to have these communities day to day. And I think it's even more important to have these communities in a time where things are really uncertain, where, you know, right now we're isolated and we need every little bit of social interaction we can get. It's just that much harder to get it. And then the other things I've been doing have been, you know, trying to help develop programs and courses and things that can share how I've been flourishing in this time, and how people like you guys and some of the other guests on the podcast have been flourishing, and try and put it in actionable pieces of information or things people can take things from and try and implement them on their own, so that it's not just the people that are really prepared for this who are able to survive it. It's at least accessible to everybody, and what they do with it is their own choice. So again, things like the podcast, I put out an ebook very, very early into the shutdown, and then working on the yet unnamed program that we're putting together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When everyone's doing an audit of the behaviors they want, something to consider, Brian, is behavior is a function of personality plus environment, and things like relationship fall into environment. Everything that's around you that induces stimuli through your senses is in the environment. And then there's personality, which is your cognitive traits and your personality characteristics. And when you want to influence behavior, you have to look at both of those, and you can adjust both of them. And usually environment is easier to adjust than your personality. At least it happens faster. And it also can instill a lot of security, like here in Canada, if you start like feeling, oh no, my behavior is less than optimal. Okay, let's take a look at what is causing that. Is it something from my environment or something from my personality? Okay, and then you start to tease that apart. And if we circle back to Maslow's, you discover, okay, I'm feeling like I might have a little food shortage because I'm a little bit short on money. Well, hey, look, the government's putting out some kind of like, not stimulus package, but emergency relief thing. Or, hey, you know what? I can borrow a couple bucks from here or here because I've nurtured a really good tribe, and these people have my back. And my behavior is improved because my environment, in my personality plus environment equals behavior equation.
Mm-hmm. Or you learn how to fish or hunt. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Then you can look at the skills. That's the personality side, your cognitive traits, the skills you have. Okay, yeah. Hey, if I can fish and hunt, this is Canada, there's no shortage of meat out there. Then, my behavior improves because I feel safe again. And we keep touching on safety as a big one because right now, most of our physiological needs are met.
Yeah, when your physiological and safety needs are feeling at a deficit, you're motivated to get out of that. And as you move up that hierarchy, the motivations change a bit. But being motivated by a deficit is not an ideal place to live. It just kind of clouds your vibes. And that's what Jeff and I at the moment are really passionate about helping people out of in whatever way possible. Like this robust summit or whatever we're going to call it, Brian. We've agreed, you and I, and I'm sure the rest of the experts too, that it'll be a free, if not very, very inexpensive course to go through, because we just want to help, we just want to make sure that people are crushing at the moment. And there's a lot of opportunity to do that right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the environment is right to implement whatever behaviors you want, and then just trying to bring the personality along with it will be the challenging part.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with me, guys. It's been great having you here. And like I said, I'll get the link to the poem up in the show notes. I'll have links to the Special Forces experience, the trials, and then eventually when our program finishes up, I know we're trying to act on a pretty expedient timeline. I will be posting about that on all my own social media.
Sweet. Yeah, thanks so much, Brian. It's always a blast talking to you, and let's do it more often.
Absolutely. I feel like we're doing pretty good lately, actually.
I know. Yeah.
Second or third call over the course of 7 days, so I'm not too upset with it.
Can we just talk every day?
It's getting to that point, and I won't have any complaints if it happens. So, yes. All right. Thank you so much, guys.
All right, Brian. Talk to you later.